I heard you say there, Jim, is it's important to have dialogue, right?
We talk all the time and we agree on everything. What is the point? It doesn't pay to talk to you all the time. If I'm going to agree with you, I might as well just talk to myself.
Thank God for those moments when we don't agree on everything, because I feel like that's what elevates everything to the next step, because not only about the compromise, but you get to see how that other person thinks and everything like that, and what makes that person um, who they are, and just accept them for who they are.
What is the ultimate goal? And when it comes to a family, whether you have kids or not, it is, hey, what's in the best interest of moving our family forward? So typically, you and your wife both have the same end goal. Hey, how do we improve our family? You and her are disagreeing with things because, I ultimately disagree with my wife on a lot of things. It's important to keep in mind the ultimate goal for both of us is
Yeah.
doing what's best for our family.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Operation Redwood podcast. I am your faithful host today, along with Chip, and we have a special guest today, and we're minus Angelo. So he has entrusted me to handle this, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see if we need him anymore. We'll just get rid of him. No, I'm just kidding. But I want to welcome a special friend of mine today, Jim Sabellico. And he is, first and foremost, and I think Jim would agree with this, a husband and a father. He's an entrepreneur, a great businessman. He's also an author. What is it you don't do, Jim? Maybe the laundry. No, I know you do the laundry. But most importantly to me, he's an encourager and a friend. So that is your introduction, Jim. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be here and, just looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, great. So I've prepped you minorly for this, so I'm prepared for it to be off the cuff, which is sort of how we roll around here. But in light of just several days after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, what is your take? Everyone out there has an opinion about it, and I'm curious what you're thinking, where your heart is.
Well, that's obviously a hot topic currently. And I think if you want my hottest take on
Yeah.
the topic as a whole, I would say that whatever your perspective on the situation is, whatever your perspective of Charlie Kirk as a person is right. And I think that that might come across difficult for a lot of people to really understand because, you're going to come across some people who absolutely hate him and some people who absolutely love him. And I think both of them are right. And that's a hard thing for people to understand. I'm sure you probably understand where I'm coming from with this and like the concept of perspective and why for each of us, we have very different life experiences and we make decisions based on those experiences. And, I think a lot of people who struggle with ego, who struggle with uh, insecurities, tend to fall into a certain bucket because that's where they find some level of safety. So it's easier to identify with a group and have that group think mentality than to just be comfortable saying, hey, I might not know the whole truth. I might be wrong. I might be right. And let's kind of see where it goes. And, again, I think we get into this certain culture where we see it. I've seen a ton of it. I'm sure you have as well. People who are going to jump to defend and people who are going to jump to vilify. And, I think if more of those people were willing to just listen to each other without trying to decide who was the one who was right, we'd make a lot more progress.
Go ahead, Chip. You wanted to add something there?
No, that was just beautiful, beautiful said. It's funny because I was just talking with Angelo, not about this topic, but just the topic had come up that people at your funeral, right? Like they will remember you from different perspectives in the sense that the encounter that they had with you or the experience that they had with you. And
Yeah.
what about if they caught you on a bad day or sometimes when it was not at your best. Of course, they're not going to remember you as this, powerful figure or this faithful figure that other people would describe. They will remember you for the experiences that they had with you. So I don't think I could have put it better than what Jim had already said about it, because both opinions are right, and it's just finding that, I guess, that common denominator and helping each other.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know him personally, obviously, but I doubt that he would disagree with this statement. He was a polarizing figure, and I think he worked diligently off of that. It worked in his favor. But what I heard you say there, Jim, is it's important to have dialogue, right? So yeah, of course you're going to be have an opinion and a perspective about him. It's thrust all over the media today. And if we could allow people to express their opinions respectfully, which I think was something that Charlie believed in. He had very hot takes, right, about a lot of things. But if we could allow people to express their opinions more openly, and it's one of the things I appreciate about you so much, Jim, is your willingness to how do I want to put this? Experience other people's opinions from their perspective and really hear them out. So I have a follow-up question. How did you get to this place? If you would mind, if you wouldn't mind describing to our listeners the concept of no half cakes, because I think it's probably going to tie together.
I think which order I want to answer that in, but I would say it took me a long time to get to that place, and it had a lot to do with figuring out who I am and how other people see me doesn't change that definition. So to answer the no half cakes question, we can go back to me as an 8-year-old kid, and I started my first business cutting grass around the neighborhood. And while it sounds pretty silly or like just a little kid thing, I was making like 150, 200 bucks a week rolling my little family lawnmower around the neighborhood cutting grass. And as an 8-year-old kid in the early 90s, that went pretty freaking far. So I got a really early taste for what it was like to have my mom drop me off at the toy store and be able to just buy whatever you want, right?
You
And
were
that felt
pimping an A,
really free.
huh?
Oh, yeah. So that parlayed into a bunch of different random life experiences from, man, you name it, I've sold it. You know, I got that kind of early taste of like, hey, money is cool and you can do a lot of fun things with it. And I chased that definition as like my standard for a long time. And we had our son, who is now 11, but when we first had him, I didn't know fatherhood, um, or at least the traditional definition of it, I should say. And this is not to take anything away from my father at all, but my father's version of fatherhood, the example that he modeled for me was you were going to be the provider. You were going to work really freaking hard and make sure your family has a roof over their head. They have money in the bank account. They've got food on the table. They've got everything they need. My father was not a, the word hands on feels wrong because it feels like he was lazy or just wasn't there, which is the opposite of the truth. But he wasn't the let's go change the diapers type of dad, just wasn't his thing. And that came from how his dad was with him. So for me, when I, had our son, I didn't know necessarily what to do to feed the child, change the child, like do things. It was such a foreign concept to me. So I leaned into the example I had and I worked even harder. And what wound up happening was 6 years flew by. And October 29th, 8:45 p.m., I come home on his 6th birthday. And if you asked me what I was doing that I was so busy until 8:45 at night, I couldn't tell you. But I come home at 8:45 at night and we, I'm like, hey, let's sing happy birthday before we put the kids to bed because it's bedtime. I knew that for sure. And my wife plops down this half-eaten birthday cake on the table. And I'm standing there, got kids who are wiping the crusties out of their eyes, who want to be excited because it's his birthday and there's a cake in front of them and they're going to get to eat cake again. And my wife is frustrated because she had the kids all day long to herself and had the friends over after school. And it's, been a long, frustrating day. And there I am standing there realizing like, this is not what success looks like.
Mm.
And, standing there in front of that half eaten cake, I realized like, this is not a thing I want to experience again. And not just in the sense of like, hey, I don't want to miss birthdays, but I don't want to miss anything. And being just the provider sucked. Like in that moment, I realized it sucked. In the next couple days, I realized how much else sucked. Like, I was in the worst physical shape of my life. I barely spent any time with my kids. I had zero relationship with my wife, and I was on the brink of divorce without even realizing it. Like, literally every metric aside from dollars in the bank and car in the driveway was absolute trash. And it was a decision that I made to continue to pursue the best version of myself and take that same energy I put into making money into making the best version of me, right? And showing up in every area of your life. So, to kind of answer the original question, I went on a journey at that point and humbled myself, found someone who was ahead of me in every identifiable area, and shut up and listened. And then part of that was a very intentional educational experience where I would say 80 to 90% or more of the content I listen to and the conversations I have are things that I would originally disagree with, right? If you were to look at the books I read, the podcasts I listen to, the articles I read, you would have a very different perspective of me because you'd assume, hey, you must identify with these people. It's all people that I otherwise disagree with. And, a lot of that comes from my belief that if two people in a business agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary.
Yeah.
That's a quote and one of my favorites. And I really took that and then kind of multiplied it out to general life. Hey, if I'm always hanging around you, right? We talk all the time and we agree on everything. What is the point?
Mhm.
It doesn't pay to talk to you all the time. If I'm going to agree with you, I might as well just talk to myself. And I think when we look at us as a society, we've sort of created these echo chambers, right? Whether by default or by design, that now we spend most of our time engaging with people we agree with. And it's very uncommon at this point to spend time speaking to people that you would ordinarily disagree with. And I think that that was one of the things that someone like a Charlie Kirk did well. Granted, some of his was different than I would have taken. Some of his delivery was a little bit different than I personally would have taken. Does it make it wrong? No, but that wasn't what I would have done. And again, I think part of that is the nature of debate, right? If the nature of debate is to kind of use the most extreme example of a situation to point out the other person's side can't be 100% right. And I think a lot of times what you see now are people who are taking that one specific example that was shared in debate and using that as quote, right? Using that as, hey, that must be his belief because he said those words. And I think that that's a very dangerous thing, right? So if you were to take the time to sit and listen to the entire conversation, you would hear multiple times where he would say, hey, let's be respectful. Hey, the person who disagrees the most should come to the front of the line, not be pushed to the back. There were certainly a lot of opportunities where he gave people who disagreed with him opportunity to say why, and plenty of times where people grew. And I think that's also a thing people need to realize in the context of conversation, of debate. What is the point? The point of debate is not to prove who is right. The point of debate is knowledge, is to grow, to learn something. And I think that that's where we need to kind of get back to is understanding, hey, it's not about finding out who's right and who's wrong because you need to bolster your ego and feel like if you're wrong, you're worthless. If you're wrong, hey, you have an opportunity to learn something. That should be the mindset shift. It's like, let me look for areas where I am wrong or my belief is being challenged because it either is going to strengthen my belief or is going to teach me something that I didn't know before. And both of those are really freaking cool. So why are we not seeking out opportunities to get around people who we already disagree with? The outcome is always going to be better if we just humble ourselves and stop trying to be right.
So there's so much in there, James, but I want to give Chip an opportunity to jump in here and ask because I'm sure there's a lot there. I'm gonna write down a question because I don't want to forget it. But go ahead, Chip. What's on your mind?
I mean, it's just well, it's something that I've never looked at it from that perspective. When Jim was talking about it, that if both people agree on everything all the time, then one of them is not needed. I mean, you look at it even from a marriage perspective, right? Now, when they always say two opposites attract, and which is true, because I'm looking at it right away. I went to my wife, and um, I don't know. It's just It just caught me by surprise because I was not ready for such an answer and so well put in a sense from the beginning of your life to what drives you to think the way you think. Because I feel like if everybody were to approach that hey, you're not, if you're wrong, you're teachable and you can come and we can have a discussion. And at the same time, I'm looking at, even if I think I'm right, sometimes I'm wrong. So let's have a discussion because maybe you can teach me something that I'm not aware of. But by having a conversation, it's not to prove, in a sense, who's right or who's wrong, but we're throwing ideas out there and let's see how we can kind of like, I wouldn't want to use coexist, but at the same time, like, let's just see how both of our ideas can come together. And maybe you're right, maybe I'm right, maybe we're both wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cross
Well, I think
pollination.
a big part of that has to do with getting everyone on the same page as far as right. So that's why we try and find the middle ground there on, hey, how do we take your perspective based on the past X amount of years? I won't reveal her age out of honor, but hey, how do we take your experience and your life and the scars, the wins, the losses, the stories, everything that has shaped your perspective? How do
Mhm.
we honor that and who you are? Because we share a very similar set of core values. And I think that's ultimately the thing that is so true yet so hidden for so many relationships with this random stranger you're going to argue on the internet. You might believe a lot of the same core values and you might have the same goal to, hey, do what's best for humanity, but we never really established that part. It's just let's argue about the surface level thing without understanding, hey, what is the actual end goal? Are we on the same page? Are we fighting for the same thing? Because then you realize you're not fighting against each other, right? You're really trying to collaborate, but doing a really terrible job at kind of communicating that is, understanding, hey, you're both pushing in the same direction, but you're speaking about it in a very different way. And I think that's what we really need to clear up is hey, are we looking for the same thing, but just not communicating it well? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to tie in what you're saying there is you were talking about debate. And for me, debate is not the same thing as conversation. Debate is proving your point, and there's a purpose of debate. But debate doesn't necessarily bring two humans together. Debate is about proving a point. I think people are not very good at debating, but they think they are. We think we're really good at debating because social media drives us into our same echo chambers, but we're debating it. That's not really debate. That's proving your point in a very angry way to probably people that mostly agree with you. You're not debating anything there, in my humble opinion. And this idea, if our listeners are intrigued by Jim saying, okay, like I want to hear other perspectives, you have got to get off of social media. You aren't going to get other perspectives on social media because it's driving you deeper and deeper and deeper into your same perspective from the algorithm. So you might think like, oh, okay, well, I'll listen to this YouTube channel. Now I think podcasting might be a little bit different in this regard. So that is probably in a more healthy direction, but pick up an actual book. My wife and I just flew this weekend and I was so excited because this group of 4 young people, I don't think they were college aged. I think they were just a bit above that. And I was so excited to see one of the young men actually reading a paper book. And I wanted to go over to him and thank him for reading a book. The other 3 of them were on their computers, but I was like, it like inspired me and thinking like, oh, there is hope, and there's lots of hope for this generation. And you can read a book on your device. I get it, but I was just so excited to see someone with actual paper in their hands.
Yeah. So I want to debate you on this topic. The definition of debate, I just looked it up, is a formal discussion on a particular topic in which opposing arguments are put forward.
Okay.
So it's really just a conversation where you and I might believe different things, and that's it. And I think I'm just being kind of silly at this point, but what I would say, because I do agree with your point that social media is a dangerous spot to gain perspective if you are not super, super, super diligent about making sure you are getting it, right? Because by default, social media, what does social media want, right? And I think that's a thing that a lot of people consider. Social media wants you to be an active user. The more that you use it, the more money that they make. And that's what the ultimate goal is, right? So they're going to put things in front of you that you were going to engage with. Typically, it's things that you either love or things that you hate because they get your attention, they get your clicks, they get your engagement, right? So I would, though, say if you are capable and you've done enough self-work to get to the point where you're calm, cool, collected, you're not going to kind of spout off at things, I would say that social media is an excellent place to gain perspective because you're going to find a whole lot of people who are very opinionated on literally everything, from sports teams to recipes to politics to whatever else. And one of the things, I might be a crazy person for this, that I like to do is to go to any particular comment section of a post, whatever the topic is, and look for the people who are responding in whatever inflammatory way on, again, whatever side, and then try and understand why. Because I think that's a thing that, to me, at least, helps me sharpen my skills for understanding perspective and for grace and really coming to see, hey, why is this person coming at it from this perspective? What is it in their life that gave them this mindset to say, hey, I disagree with this topic or I feel this way? Again, it has to do, in my opinion, with their story, their perspective, the way they grew up. And I think if you start to kind of understand that, it helps you level up your conversation and your relationships because you can see things from a different way. I want to give you two different examples. When COVID first hit, nobody was going out, right? Everyone was locked in their homes. A whole different topic I won't get into. But one of the habits I picked up in that time was going for a late night walk. And I enjoyed at the end of the day, it's like 9, 10 o'clock, to be able to just go take a walk down Main Street, down wherever, because it was so quiet. There was nobody out. There was nothing going on. It was just peaceful to be able to go out and do that. And I enjoyed it so much that I asked my wife, I said, hey, why don't you go and do that? It's such a relaxing way to kind of end your day. It's just quiet. You could just relax. And me being 6'4" brick wall, never stopped to think about from her perspective, why her as a 5'0" tiny female would not want to be walking out in a dark street in the middle of the night because there is possible danger that I never considered. I've never once stopped to consider, hey, is some random dude going to come walk up on me and try and do whatever? Never a thought in my mind. From her perspective, she's got a totally different, point of view, literally a foot lower in this case, that it's a very different experience. And I think, if we expand that out into everything else in our lives, our perspectives, our fears, our concerns, the things that we enjoy are totally different, based on our personal perspective. And I think that's the thing that we got to learn way more. I think people tend to generalize it into your race, your gender, your your income level, right? There's so many things that we try and group into buckets, but there are so many different qualities that make a person. You can't condense them into 5 or 6 different buckets and call it a day. I think that's what we try and do because it's convenient. Yeah. And I think it's hard to have perspective because you really need to remove yourself from the situation.
And you have to work at it. So I fully agree with you. I fully support the making social media work for you. I assume you would agree with this. That takes effort. It takes effort.
100%.
And if you're not at that place, and you said that, but I want to reiterate, if you're not at that place, social media can be very dangerous. So if you aren't confident, if you aren't, and you said this, I'm just reiterating it. If you don't know who you are, do that work first, because it will poison you. Social media will poison you. And I agree. It's just a service. It in and of itself isn't evil. It's acting off of what we feed it. It's a mirror of us. It's a mirror of our hearts. I love I love this comment. You know, I'm sure people have heard this before, but the youth group leader who says social media is terrible. Look at the pictures it's sending me. It's sending me all these pictures of scantily clad women. Well, you've fed it that information. It feeds you what it thinks you're interested in. So we've
Well,
got to
I
be
will say this
mindful.
on that topic because to a degree, he's not wrong. It's just zoomed out a little bit, right? So if you were to go and create a brand new social media account today, within minutes, you'd be served that same content, right? And I've done this experiment where I've set up a Instagram account as a male and as a female. Now, I'll tell you, when you tick the mailbox, the content that you are fed is way different and way faster because, again, as a whole, they understand that, hey, what is going to grab your attention? They're going to, they're going to leverage those carnal instincts. That's what you want to see, right? So I think it has to do way more with what we as a society tend to engage in, right? And again, do I think Facebook is evil? No, but I don't necessarily believe that they're acting with the same level of integrity and core value that I personally would like to see. And does that have to do with how much dollars they make? Yes.
Yeah.
So if Mark Zuckerberg had said, hey, I've suddenly discovered I have core values and integrity, I am going to do what's in the best interest of society, not what's in the best interest of keeping people on the platform, you would see the algorithm start to change, where we are starting to feed people more generally motivating and positive information rather than just whatever they're going to engage in. And I think that's a nuanced approach to it, but I think it's one that you have to be aware of.
Yeah, I agree. So taking this a step further, how do we help people if we say that the goal, right? And I agree, there's a conversation going on in debate. How do we move people from merely factual debating to heart-centered conversations? So I know that's a passion of yours as well, Jim.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I would say you have to do it for yourself first. So I know that may be a kind of a cop out of an answer, so I'll give you a part B to that. But I truly do believe, if you work on kind of healing your own junk first, rather than, worrying about, hey, how do I show up best for the other people? Kind of how do you show up best for yourself and really understand, hey, where do I have room to grow? What are my perspectives? What are my beliefs? What are my core values? What are the things that I'm putting out into the world? And you truly understand who you are. It allows you to show up in a spot where you don't need to be served by that relationship. So when you look at the conversations you have with other people, a lot of the time, what you are ultimately looking to do is be seen or heard by that other person. And I'm sure you've run into conversations like this where the other person always has to share a story, or whatever you tell them, Tommy Topper over there has to tell you something that relates to their life that either is better than or just different or whatever it is, because people want to be heard. And I think the hard part here is, again, doing the work initially to feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard yourself so that you can show up in conversations and not need that from them, right? Because when you don't need that from them, you can offer that to them. And I think that's kind of the part that people need to focus on is doing the work themselves. And that's obviously not the funnest answer because people don't want to hear that. They want to hear it's someone else's fault. But, if you dedicate yourself, and this doesn't really take that long in the grand scheme of things, but if you dedicate yourself and do the work to kind of understand, hey, how can I improve my perspective? How can I improve my grace? How can I grow as a person and show up to be the best version of me? You're going to start to find that those things kind of happen organically, just as a side effect of how you show up in the world.
I appreciate that answer. I was thinking as you're discussing that and I'm interested in your input on this too, Chip, because I know you often see some spiritual implications really well. But when you're saying working on yourself, I think spiritual people, I'm going to keep it general there, and Christians specifically, because we hold that the Holy Spirit lives within us, and we always have someone that we can bounce ideas off of. And everyone has an inner voice, but I think for the Christian, that inner voice is also infused with something that is external to them. The point that I'm getting at is, you said, so I can relate very deeply to this, and I'm doing exactly what you said right now. That's why I paused. But I can relate very deeply. I was just having a conversation with a gentleman, and I could tell he just wanted to be heard. And there was a lot of things I wanted to say, but I just stopped talking and listened because it was fruitless. Because every time I attempted, I was like, okay, I'll just listen. And it's interesting, right? Because when that happens, I'm sure you've had it happen, Jim. I bet you've had it happen to you too as well, Chip. People say like that was such a great conversation. And you're going like, yeah, that really wasn't a conversation. It was a one-sided listening experience. But it proves the point that no one is listening.
So, Samuel, when you shared that, it made me think of this experience that I've had with my kids, and I'm sure other people can relate. If you've ever taken your kid to a swimming pool, they'll say, "Hey, Dad, look at me do this jump," or "Look at me do this dive." And if you stop and notice, if you still have kids who do this, stop and notice what happens the moment that they get out of the water. Their head snaps to go look at you to see if you saw what they did. And I think, Samuel, when you described that, it really made me think of that, because if I'm sitting next to the pool and I'm on my phone, I am aware of the jump that they just did. Right? I know that they're in the pool. I know they're jumping off the diving board. I'm aware of what's going on. But there's a difference between being aware of and them getting that double confirmation that they locked eyes with me and they saw that I saw what they did. And I think that's the thing that people are missing in that Holy Spirit conversation, is that double confirmation. Right? Because there's a little bit of a difference for people on the receiving end when you speak to Holy Spirit versus you hear Holy Spirit confirm or see things move. And, that takes a trained eye, a trained ear, and an open eye and an open ear to listen to how God is showing up in your life. And I think that is a very different skill set that people have not necessarily mastered yet. And it takes a quieting of yourself to really be able to listen to and hear that confirmation or see God moving in your life. Because a lot of people will speak to God, they'll pray for help, they'll speak to Holy Spirit. A lot of people don't even know necessarily which one they're really doing, but they'll do that, but they won't necessarily hear confirmation. It's like, "Hey, Dad, look at me do this dive," and then they look around and they're like, "Did you see me? Did you not?" Like they don't know for sure yet, so it leads to this confusion or this concern that they don't feel that. So I think a lot of people are chasing that kind of in-person experience to physically double confirm that person saw them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And piggybacking off of that, there is a difficulty in our culture. It could be worldwide, but I'm just going to speak for Western culture to slow down enough to find that confirmation, because it's there 9 times out of 10. Sometimes it seems that God is silent. I will respect that. If you whip your head around, and what if your dad was looking, but you whipped your head around so quickly that you couldn't make contact, right? And then you just said, well, he didn't care. Well, potentially he did, but he was slower to respond than you were hoping.
Yeah. Or you were expecting a thumbs up and he said, "Good job."
Or got an approving
Could,
nod. Yeah,
right. It could be a whole bunch of different things, but it comes down to ultimately what is our expectation,
right.
and is our expectation being met, rather than am I keeping an open ear, and an open eye?
So we're reaching our end. This has been very, very rich. There's so much to unpack, and hopefully we could have you back on at some other point, because things changed, and we do want to talk about your book at some later point. I know you just wrote a fantastic book. I do want to ask you this question as we get ready to close, and then we can each share our concluding thoughts. But how do you share your deep convictions, Jim? And maybe how isn't the right word. What is the best way to go about sharing your convictions with maybe people that do disagree, since you do such a good job of working on that?
Thank you for that. And I would say, I think coming from a place of understanding and perspective, first and foremost. So it doesn't have to be this thing where you walk away and one person feels like they were seen and heard and the other person feels empty. That doesn't have to be the situation where one person feels like they were right, the other person feels like they're pissed off that the conversation ended. I think if you come at it from the situation, from like the perspective of hey, how can I show up, or how can God use me in this moment, without expectation for, feeling the need to get your word across, and just trusting the fact that the conversation that needs to be had is the one that's going to be had. Not trying to control everything, but just show up as yourself. And again, I think a big part of that is really knowing who you are and how you show up in the world. But if you continue to show up for other people and just kind of let the conversation flow through you, not from you, I think that kind of sells itself out.
Thank you. What are your thoughts?
I mean, it just brought me back to a moment where I had a friend that, again, lived according, mm, as we say, to the world. And I didn't know how to approach it because I didn't want to be disrespectful in a way to like drive him away. But when the opportunity was given, I obviously shared why I believe what I believe. And I got to tell you, I mean, there was, I would say, probably about a year of time that went by until I got one night. I still remember it was like around 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. And there was this particular guy calling me, and he said, the first question wasn't even, "Hi, how you doing?" He said, "When you pray, how do you pray?" And I had to take a step back and look at my phone and see if this is the right person that is calling me, because I've been praying for him, obviously, for a moment of this encounter, and I felt convicted in the sense that I didn't know if I'm sharing enough with him, but at the same time, I didn't want to be coming out as, trying to overpower him, or tell him that, hey, you're stupid for thinking that way or anything like that. But it was this moment in time where I feel like his walls, God was taking them down one by one, and he was at a vulnerable state when he came in, and I was able then to share with him how, in a sense, like how to pray, why he feels the way he feels like that, and just allow a safe space for him to be, that he can have a conversation with me, and God used me in a way that whatever at that moment, I feel like whatever God had in store for him to relate to him, that I was just a vessel to be able to be used, and hopefully bring some light to him, in a sense that, God was always with him. That's why he's still here, and that's why he can have that moment, that encounter, when God is tugging at his heart.
Yeah. Thank you, Chip. Jim, I'm going to give you the final word, but some thoughts that I have. So what I'm receiving from this, and I'd like you to think, Jim, a little bit about too, like where should people take this conversation? Where does it go from here? We always want to leave our listeners with what's the next step? What's the next actionable step? What I'm taking away is, first, make everything matter. Make everything that you do matter. And in light of what happened with Charlie, you never know. You never know what conversation, what action could be your last. So I also want to add, failure is never the end, right? So one of the goals, and I think this is just really interesting and intriguing to me. One of the goals that Charlie had was having 20,000 chapters of Turning Point across the country. And most people would say dying would be a pretty significant problem in your organization's development. And after his wife spoke, there were requests for, now I don't know if it's 38,000 new or total, but his goal ended up being far surpassed with his failure at the end of his life. So one never knows what is success or what failure may be a result of that. I had a very brief conversation with a friend right after failing to complete a Spartan Ultra. And I loved how he finished the conversation. He said, "Congratulations on your successful," he didn't say attempt, or it just said on your success. And it was successful because I went out and accomplished what I set out to do. I attempted something that most people wouldn't even try. I was climbing up mountains that were insane. And I don't want to go into that right now. And the point is, too, 75% of people fail to complete it. But success can be measured in lots of ways. Trying, in my view, is never failing. Trying is never failing. Trying is always success. What do you have for us, Jim, as we conclude?
So, a couple things. Number one, the first thing that comes to mind is you may not know now, but later you'll understand, right? And I think to really take that to heart, almost every, or not every example that I could point to in my life where I thought, hey, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, has turned out better in the long run. And I think when you start to recognize that pattern existing, it starts to make it easier. And I don't think it's ever going to be truly easy, but it's easier to recognize in the moment that, hey, this thing that feels like the other world right now is going to be used for greater good. And if it hasn't yet, keep waiting. And I truly think that that's the thing that most people need to really take to heart. Is there's situations in your life that are really frustrating. It could be relationships, could be things with yourself, could be, whatever it might be. But if you continue to be obedient, you continue to be intentional, things will work out in your favor in time, right? And if it hasn't worked out yet, it's just not the right time yet, but it's coming. And it takes a certain amount of faith. It takes a certain amount of selflessness, right? To kind of remove that ego and pride that feels like, you need to be the hardest worker in the room and you need to control everything. And it's a scary place to be, especially if you're a high achiever and you want to, you're used to that hustle and grind mentality where you feel like you can outwork everybody and kind of control the results based on your effort. To be able to recognize the fact that you can't do that necessarily and to release control and to surrender that control, I really feel like is a difficult place for a lot of people to start. So you asked me kind of what I think the best starting point would be. And I would say get around somebody who makes you feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard. And if you have that person in your life, you're going to start to realize that you can do a lot more things than you realize because you have someone you can confide in without fear of judgment. You have someone who's going to be there to stand shoulder to shoulder with you to go through these experiences and kind of help you, give you just that little bit of support that you need to start recognizing that. And it's akin to, the first time you ride a bike and you've got those training wheels. It's not that you can't do it, but sometimes you just need a little bit of guidance. You need a little bit of support on the sides, right? And if you've ever seen training wheels work on a bike, they're kind of wobbly, right? Like the training wheels are not always in contact with the ground. And the goal is the faster that you go, the training wheels never hit the ground. The training wheels are there as sort of guardrails, right? They're there just to make sure you don't go too far to one side or the other. And that's ultimately what you need in your life. You need friends who are going to be there as guardrails for you. People who are going to be there to kind of support you to make sure, hey, they're going to give you some room to run. They're going to give you a little bit of leeway to go side to side, but they're not going to let you kind of fall too far. And to be able to do that without making you feel judged or less than, I think is a really powerful place because it gives you that courage that you need initially to be able to kind of show up how you want to show up and experiment. All of this is really just continuing to be the better version of yourself that you were designed to be. Removing all the societal junk that we've placed on ourselves, the guilt and the fear and the shame and all that crap that we've piled on. And we're removing that to get back to how we were designed to be. So having someone there by your side to kind of be that encourager and be the person to support you and make you feel loved, appreciated, seen, and heard, I think is really the ultimate kind of life hack, if you will.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Jim. And I want to end this by saying thank you for always being there as an encouragement for me. I appreciate it. And I'm certain you've encouraged our listeners. And by the way, if you are looking for that type of group, check out our Redwood page. We're here to encourage you and help you find what you need if this is not it. So until next time, Redwood out.